How is everyone this afternoon? Afternoon, it's afternoon, right? Here anyway? Yes. Woo! All right. How was lunch? Was lunch good? Yeah. Excellent. All right. I am here today to talk about tales of Drupal's past. Ooh. What I did a couple of weeks ago up on Twitter and Drupal Planet was kind of put a call out to the Drupal community to try and tell me their Drupal origin stories. So you know how like comic book characters have origin stories, like Spider-Man got bit by a spider, a radioactive spider, and like Batman became an orphan suddenly, and that kind of launched their superhero-dom. I was curious to talk to Drupal people about what their origin stories were and how they got started. So this talk will go into a little bit of that, and then what I was hoping to do at the end of the talk was leave time and space for people in the audience to also share their stories in whichever language you're the most comfortable in. So, spoiler alert, there'll be an opportunity for you to have some mic time later as well. But first, I want to give a little bit of quick background because I know there's some people who are brand new to Drupal here at this conference. Is anybody like that in this room? Anybody here new to Drupal? A couple people. All right, so I'll go through this fast because everyone else is like, yeah, we know that this is already. So, I always say Drupal is three things. So Drupal is number one, powerful content management system. Here are some of its features. It's worth pointing out that Drupal 8 didn't originally ship with all of these features. A lot of these features have been added in the incremental 6-month release cycle that GapWar spoke about in his talk earlier. There's a whole bunch of good features in Drupal 8, some impressive stats. According to Built With, we're now running 3% of the internet, which is pretty awesome. We know of about 1 million Drupal sites. That number fluctuates up and down. Those are the numbers of sites that are reporting back to Drupal.org to check for security updates and that sort of thing. And there's also over 1,000 service providers that are providing Drupal expertise, which is really great from a vendor lock-in point of view, which Jam alluded to earlier. Here are some of the organizations that use Drupal. There's everything in this list from nonprofit organizations to media companies to bands, financial companies, pharmaceutical companies, you name it, there's probably a Drupal site for it, which is pretty awesome. That CMS is fueled by an extensible developer framework. So Drupal is actually really interesting to work on because on the one hand, it's a development platform with all these kinds of features, JSON APIs, Symfony, and stuff like that. And so we're trying to make Drupal attractive to developers who want to extend the platform and work on it, but at the same time also have to make it attractive to people who don't know what Drupal is at all and could never write a line of code themselves and are just interacting with Drupal through the UI, whether that's as a content author or a site builder. So it's a really interesting, cool project to work on from that perspective. Here are some impressive stats about our developer framework. There's over 7,000 add-on modules for Drupal 8 to extend how it works. So you can download a ratings module, or you can download, a calendar module, or any of these kinds of things. We also care a lot about the quality of the code in Drupal. So there's over 26,000 automated tests that run on every single commit that we make to the project. And several contributed modules also have automated test coverage as well. And I thought this was a cool stat, that just this week, there have been 1,337 Git commits. No joke. It's a pretty cool number. Woo! And those commits were delivered by this amazing community. So here's a few of us at DrupalCon Seattle. That was just a few weeks ago. And we just had the group photo with everybody in there, and that was a way to take over the lobby, people. That was really good. Some impressive stats about our community. It's over 1 million users, so these are people who took the time to make a Drupal.org account, whether to ask a question or to contribute code back or to attend an event or any of those kinds of things. Of those million users, about 50,000 of them are developers, so they have a Git commit access to do whatever they want to do with that. And then of that amount, 5,000 of those people contribute to core in some way, whether that's code, testing, reviews, QA, accessibility, usability. There's a number of different ways that people contribute. And we love all of those people, and so these stats together make Drupal one of the most large open source communities out there. And it's interesting to attend an event like, say, Community Leadership Summit at OSCON, where there are other open source projects, because you see that we've grappled with a lot of community scalability issues that other projects haven't necessarily dealt with yet. So what I want to do now is talk a little bit more about that community aspect of this, by getting to know the stories behind some of these names and highlight some common themes along the way. So let's get a start. So I'll talk about myself for people who don't know me. It's easiest to start with me because I'm here. So my name is Angie Byron, or I go by WebChick on the internet. Everywhere except Gmail, and I don't know who that is, but they're very confused and get a lot of emails they don't understand. So I was interested in open source from like a teenager, and I thought it was just amazing that the power of open source lets you, like have all this, like the best of breed code that solve all kinds of problems for the world and then just give it away for free. I was like, this is amazing, because this can empower, nonprofit organizations, education systems, all kinds of stuff. And so I wanted to dive in and learn everything there was to know about it. However, I always thought I would never be smart enough to actually contribute back to Drupal, to open source. And so, I kind of stayed this fangirl on the sidelines for a bit. And then come to much, much later in my career, I was at school finishing up my third diploma or something like that. I immigrated to Canada. It took a while. But anyway, so I was at the end of my education, and my instructor told me about this program called Google Summer of Code. And I was like, oh, well, they must know that we're students, so we don't know everything yet, so maybe I will apply to that. And I am a little bit of a nerd. I don't know if you could tell that from the everything about me. But so I'm one of those people that goes around on the internet and I click view source on every web page that I visit to see what's kind of happening under the hood. And there was this really cool website around back then called Spread Firefox. And this website allowed you to see, allowed anybody to upload events happening at their campus, or posters that they'd made, or t-shirt designs, or what have you. But anyone could upload code, or like these kind of marketing assets about the Firefox browser. And I thought, this is really neat. Like, what's powering this? Oh, Drupal. Okay, cool. And just kind of filed that away for later. But then saw Drupal on the name of the Google Summer of Code mentor list, and I was like, hey, let me give that a shot, By some miracle, I got accepted, which was funny, because I had zero Drupal development experience at all. Hadn't even installed it, hadn't downloaded anything. But I wrote a compelling case, I guess, and so I got picked at the 11th hour. And then it was funny, because when I got on this side of the you must be that smart to contribute fence, I was like, wow, anyone could do this, and I can do everything. And so I, dove into doing like documentation, core patches, contributed modules, the security team, the webmasters team, like anything I could do to kind of make up for like a decade of lost time, thinking I wasn't smart enough to do this. And so that really launched my career. I worked at Lullabot for a long time. I work at Acquia now, where I get paid full-time to work on making Drupal awesome and helping the people around Drupal make it awesome, which is pretty great. My story kind of touches on a general theme that I heard a lot reflected in these stories from the origin stories, which is that Drupal people, when they come into the Drupal project, tend to get really excited and want to give back more, whether that's more of themselves, more to other people. But there's a lot of this kind of theme in the general stories that we heard. So I'll start with GapWar, who's over there. GapWar, way back in 2003, was running a Hungarian web community. And they wanted to improve their systems, so they looked at different options. And they ended up picking Drupal because Drupal had a nice separated front end and back end. And what's funny about that is by the time they launched, they no longer had a separate front end and back end, and they were in fact the same thing, which is pretty funny. And then circle back to 2019, and now we're in decoupled, and we're trying to make them different again. It's like, it's all circular and stuff like that. But anyway, what they needed out of Drupal is to make everything multilingual. They needed Hungarian everything, Hungarian URLs, Hungarian content, Hungarian menu items, and Drupal at the time couldn't do that. And so very quickly, GapWar became a core contributor because that was the only way to fix his problem. And lo and behold, 16 years later, is still working on multilingual, working on empowering communities, and so much more. So thank you, GapWar. You're awesome. Yeah. One thing I particularly want to draw attention to with GapWar's contributions, Jam earlier talked about the importance of multipliers. So it's not just you, but other people that sort of collaborate together to build this awesome thing. One of the initiatives that GapWar has run over the years is the D8MI, or Drupal 8 Multilingual Initiative, back in Drupal 8 days, when we were still developing that. And he understood pretty quickly that he was never going to do all of that work himself. There was no possible way. And he didn't want to do all the work himself because there was all these other people from all over the world that really cared about multilingual. It would be much better for him to help them help themselves by contributing to the project. And so he built out this website that has a whole bunch of features like, hey, look at this cool stuff, and here's a tag cloud of all the people who helped, and here's this. And then went one step further to make that website a reusable open source project called Rocket Ship, so any of the Drupal initiatives could use it to further their initiatives. And then his most recent thing has been the talk that he gave earlier today. The Drupal 9 talk is also a reusable presentation so that he doesn't personally have to attend every single Drupal event, and instead other people can give that talk and get the information disseminated out. So anyway, lots of attention to scaling the community. Another person who has done a lot about scaling himself is Vijaya, who lives in the United Kingdom. And he originally was working graveyard shift, data entry, that kind of thing in university, and found his way to Drupal. And over time, became involved in developing a lot of enterprise websites, became one of the top, I think he's number 26 on the top Drupal core contributors by commits. So he's become one of the top contributors. He's also poured a lot of energy into mentoring and hiring other Drupal developers, so trying to get more Drupal people into the fold. Joseph is someone who is from Switzerland, but has spent a lot of time in this part of the world and really appreciates the fact that this camp is happening and kind of allowing networking and collaboration to happen between sort of elements of the Eastern Europe community. He did a keynote over in Drupal Donetsk just before kind of the war broke out and things got a little scary. Joseph also has done a whole bunch of photography. So if you've seen any pictures from any Drupal events in Europe, a lot of times you'll say photo credit to Dasjo. And another kind of interesting contribution he made as well, kind of outside the box, is organized a tour de Drupal. So for DrupalCon Europe, basically organizing cyclists from all over Europe to come to the conference on bike, because why not, you know? And I thought it was interesting in that this is a cool way of talking about that there's many different ways to contribute to the project and they aren't through code and through conventional means. Another person who hasn't contributed through conventional means is Zsofi Major, who is from Hungary. She's a project manager and got into Drupal via that route, and then became an event organizer, so organized Drupal Iron Camp, Drupalathon, Drupal Dev Days Szeged, and various other events, which is really important because although she hasn't contributed a line of code to Drupal that I'm aware of, through the events that she's hosted, she's allowed thousands of lines of code to get written by the people who've attended there and found networking opportunities and that kind of thing. So we can't overestimate the impact of events like this for getting people in the same room and talking to each other and solving problems. A lot of people that responded also came from a lot of non-traditional backgrounds. Not everybody, some of us came from techie backgrounds, but a lot of people came from non-traditional backgrounds, like for example, Matt Glein, who works on Drupal commerce stuff. So he was originally a keg tosser, to use his words, which is another word for a beer delivery person. That's his truck, or one of them that he drove. He didn't think he could be a developer because he didn't have a CS degree, you know? Which I also don't have a CS degree, by the way. So apparently they'll send you to Belarus to talk to people if you don't have a CS degree, but anyway. And so he got a break as a local marketing person, got into e-commerce that way, was looking for suitable commerce solutions, and then ran his way into Drupal, which is pretty awesome turnaround. And I'm imagining that being a Drupal developer pays a little bit better than being a beer truck delivery driver, although I don't know, because I don't have personal experience with that. Branislav is another person who came from a non-traditional background. So he started out as a medical student and was going to become a doctor and all of those kinds of things. He ended up choosing Drupal for a website he needed to do because it was the only CMS he could find that touted accessibility as one of its main features, which is true. We have an accessibility team, accessibility gate. Any UI changes we make to core have to pass that and be WCAG compliant and such. After he built this site, he decided he liked Drupal more than medicine, and so decided to switch careers entirely, and ended up founding a Drupal agency in Serbia, where he employed a whole bunch of Serbian kids, that not literal children, but anyway, college students and such, that were able to build up further Drupal sites, which was really empowering for people in that region. Drupal.org has a list of contributing organizations, and one thing that's neat about it is it's ordered by the number of contributions they make. So we have a credit system on Drupal.org where anytime that you make a meaningful contribution, whether it's a contribution to an issue, a case study, this kind of thing, you're ranked in this list of things. And people can find companies based in the location they're on or this kind of thing. And it's a great incentive to give back more that people do. Kristin, she's based in the United States. She was a blogger on union issues, and in the United States, unions are a big part of what makes the world go around over there. She was introduced to Drupal and site building via that. She wanted to make improvements to the website that they use for blogging, and then went on from there to also become an event organizer. So she organizes something called GovCon, Drupal GovCon, which pulls around 900 attendees and makes it one of the largest events in the East Coast United States. If you're interested in Drupal in a particular aspect like government or like higher ed or like pharmaceuticals or healthcare or anything like that, Drupal.org also has a case study section that talks about not just here's what the websites are and what they look like, but actually goes into some detail as to how they were built and what modules they used and this kind of thing. So this is a really useful resource for people who are getting started. Rachel Lawson is the community liaison for the Drupal Association. So she goes around, gets to know some of the local community people, escalates any issues that they have to the Drupal Association so they can better foster the community. She comes from all sorts of backgrounds. She was in outdoor education, defense, finance, pharmaceutical company. She ran into a situation where she was trying to talk to an agency about what she needed. And they weren't getting it, and so she actually just downloaded Drupal to prototype something really quick, and then that ended up becoming the basis for the site that they used, and then decided, hey, that was really fun, and then proceeded to kind of get into Drupal as a career from there. Gareth Weston, when he was in high school, he had a high school counselor that basically told him, you're not clever enough to get into IT, which is a wonderful thing for someone to tell a high school student. But anyway, so he ended up getting into repairing cars, because that's something that he was good at and apparently clever enough to do, and did that up until he got into a motorcycle accident, which is scary. But that forced him to spend time away from work, kind of reevaluate his life. He spent some time backpacking in Australia. And then from there, decided, you know what, I'm just going to go for it, because what's holding me back? And he went back to school. He ended up graduating with honors from this computer program, and then is now hired as a Drupal developer at CTI Digital. So it just goes to show, don't listen to anybody in high school. I'm just kidding. Balazs, he's here. He's one of the Drupal Camp Belarus conference organizers. He started as a poet. That was his original thing. And he would mentor other artists on how to be better at art. And then came across Drupal via the Hungarian developer community and kind of fell in love with that. And now works with Drupal mentoring others, and trying to grow the community via him. And he has this quote, which is, I came for the community, I got the code, and then I stayed for both. So he really thought the community was awesome, found out about the code via that community, and then decided to stay put because, hey, Drupal is pretty awesome. I wanted to talk a little bit here about Drupal's mentoring program. So Drupal has a pretty robust mentoring program. This is a bunch of mentors from, gosh, I don't know, DrupalCon LA maybe? At DrupalCon, what we'll do is have a room full of people in colorful t-shirts that kind of pre-vet a list of issues for people to work on that are kind of novice issues or easy getting started issues. They run a training to get people up to speed on the development process and what tools are needed, and they basically pair contributors up with mentors to help them through their first core contribution. And then the really cool thing is at the end of the day, or towards the end of the day, we pick one of the changes that got done. Say it was a typo fix or a documentation improvement or a something sort of small you can wrap your head around. And we do what's called a live commit of one of the contributors' patches. So someone like me gets up and actually does the git commands to actually add their changes to the software live in front of everybody. And there's banging on the tables and cheering and all this kind of stuff. It's also a great opportunity for people to critique how I use Git. So I really appreciate that. It's you're doing it wrong, and then I've learned more things. So that's good too. So if that kind of thing sounds fun to you, this is what we're doing tomorrow. We're having a mentored contribution day, so you can come by. There's more information at this URL. I'll be there. I know Balazs will be there. I'm pretty sure most of us are going to be there to be on hand, help people find issues to work on, walk you through it. The sprint I'm running that I'm really excited about is the sprint to remove deprecated code from modules so that they're Drupal 9 ready. Because even though Drupal 9 is not coming out for another year, it never hurts to get started early. And it's really good practice with, a lot of these issues are find and replace kind of things, and so a lot of them make really good patches if you've never contributed before. The third major, kind of theme was that Drupal changes lives in some cases. So Ayesh is from Sri Lanka. He started with Drupal at age 16 on a Nokia 6600. And if you don't know what that is, which I did not know what that is, this is what that looks like. So can you imagine doing development on something that looks like this? I have mad respect for anyone who could possibly do that. Once he got into Drupal, it basically freed him up to freelance, and he was able to travel the entire world. So he hiked the GR20. I don't know what that is, but apparently something very impressive, which included going to an active volcano where you weren't allowed to hike. And he was like, forget it, I'm going to hike anyway. He biked everywhere around the world, and he's visited 16 countries in the last year. So Drupal's kind of empowered him to kind of explore the world and make money at the same time. It's pretty epic. And I think he no longer develops on one of these, which is good. Catalina Gishy is from Hungary originally, but now living in Canada. He started out as kind of a fledgling web developer and then ran into GapWar at the local Hungarian developer community and learned about Drupal via that, and went on to become one of the most prolific core contributors that there were. He wrote a huge swaths of Drupal 4.6, 4.7, 5, 6, 7. He's now kind of did the work, earned enough money, he was able to relocate to Canada, and he was able to kind of change his whole life around. He's like, now I walk the world freely, and I can dream big. That's basically his quote. So I think that that's a pretty cool story. Sean B., who's one of the major contributors to the media initiative, he raised that he started out as a poor kid surrounded by drugs and violence and crime and other aspects like that. Drupal allowed him to get out of that life and build a completely new life for himself and his family that's stable and secure and not filled with those kinds of bad things. And so it's really neat to hear these kind of impacts that Drupal has, because a lot of us think of this as just software, bits and bytes, but it actually has a transformative effect on some people's lives. And then I'd say the fourth major theme, and the last major theme, is that Drupal people inspire others. These are just a smattering of the names that people in this talk brought up, as people who inspired them or helped them in some way. And there are actually thousands of people that this is true of. And if someone has inspired you, you can actually help mark them as a mentor on Drupal.org. So if you go to your Drupal.org user profile, there's a Drupal section, and down in there, there's a My Mentors section, and you can fill out people's names. And how that manifests itself is that on your user profile, it will show a list of all the people that have mentored you. And there's also a list of people who have listed you as a mentor, which is pretty awesome. It's a great way to just, give credit to the people who have helped you along the way, because almost every story that I ran into has people who were like, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for so-and-so. So let's talk about the so-and-sos and get them an elevated profile so people know about it. Okay, so what I wanted to do now is talk about your stories, and I also have backup stories if our audience is shy, because that could happen. But what I would prefer to do is give folks in the audience the opportunity to talk about themselves, how they got started with Drupal, what were you doing before Drupal? What made Drupal the right choice for you? what are you doing now, career-wise, life changes-wise, this kind of thing. If you've contributed back to the project, how have you done that? In what ways? And remember, I'm using contribution in the broadest terms, like Jam's scary spider graph that he showed earlier with all the different ways to contribute. I mean that. So anything from I contributed stuff to, contributed modules and coding to I organized a local user group in my area to anything like that. And also, if you want to name who helped you along the way, because many of us have other people to thank on that journey. So what does that sound like? Do people have stories that they want to talk about? Because otherwise I can keep going. But I think it would be pretty cool to hear from some folks here, if you're game. So, yes, an awkward story. That's great. So we need a mic. Here's a mic. Whoop. I don't know if that's working. So could you introduce yourself, where you're from, and then tell us your awkward story?
Sure. I'm Kate from Moscow. I've been working with Drupal maybe for 7 years now. So when I started working with Drupal, it happened pretty much accidentally. I was hired as an expert in Drupal, but I didn't know Drupal at all. And so I started watching Lulabot videos from you.
Oh, yeah. Awesome.
And I was quite young. I didn't have enough time and money to learn all that stuff in a good pace, so I did it at nights. But at work, to remind myself and to bring some courage for myself, I added your picture from Linux Journal as my desktop wallpaper.
Aww.
It looked very awkward, but this is... So for maybe 2 years, it was my desktop wallpaper, your picture, and you reminded me every time when I had some trouble that you are here to help me. Thank you very much.
That means so much. Thank you, Kate. Wow.
Hello, my name is Alex. I started to work with Drupal, I think, in 2008. It was my first job when, because of the Drupal job, they fired me from the university, so I didn't finish the university at all. And after 2 or 3 years of working with Drupal, I started with Drupal 5 and Drupal 6, and I didn't contribute at all to community. We didn't even upload any patch because we didn't have time to. And after Kate started to send Drupal Digest, it's some local newsletter about Drupal, I saw that if she can provide some digest and contribute, then so can I. And I started to help with some local events, just provided. I'm really good in teaching anyone else to understand what's going on in Drupal. And right now, I think I can mark the mentor is Angie Byron. I don't know he's here or not, because I'm checking how much he doing the contribute and just wondering how it's possible. So, and I just want to provide as much patch as I can in the core. So that's all.
Thank you. That's awesome. Boyan, did you want to tell your awesome story? Yes.
Oh, my story is long. So, does this work? Yeah. So 2010, I was a Summer of Code student as well, and that was also kind of accidental. I was a student in Serbia, and I got assigned to Ryan, which I didn't think was possible, because I was like, I want to do a Drupal module, and everyone was like, sure, go do it, and here is Ryan Zarama as a mentor, which was a big thing even back then. And when I finished the Summer of Code program, I first got the money that I needed to buy the plane ticket for my first DrupalCon. And I went there, and then Ryan and Damian Tournou convinced the company to basically hire me. So on my 21st birthday, I moved to Paris to work for Commerce Guys, and I was like, this is happening.
Wow.
And Ryan and Damian worked with me a lot in the early days, but my non-Commerce Guys story is the story of me working with chicks on the pagination patch for entity field query in the Drupal 7 days. We spent weeks on that, and he really helped me finish that. And then code freeze happened or something like that. There was some kind of deadline. And then Angie said, I know I'm technically not supposed to commit this, but it doesn't have like it's not dangerous, and this is Barnes' first patch, and he's kind of awesome, so I'm going to commit it anyway. So that gave me energy for like years.
Great. I didn't know that. That's funny. I was talking about your story about the that you told earlier in your talk about the I got $30 to install Joomla, like that stuff. But yeah, very cool. Other people want to share your stories? Yeah.
My name is Dmitry, Drupal Squad. I'm supposed to be a house builder, but about 25 years ago, I saw first PC, and I decided I like it, and it changed my entire life. I was able to graduate my building college, but I changed my life. So I spent some time working on secret military plant, on gas station, but finally I was working on small agency which contains one developer, me, two manager, and one designer. We were building sites for local market. And finally, we tried to find any solution to any ready-to-sell solution to build sites. And we spent some time looking on different systems, including Drupal 4-point-something. It was bad at the time, and we decided to go with our own system. It still works on other sites, but a couple of years later, we realized what we are going to write Drupal, and we switched to Drupal. So I stick with Drupal for 10 years, something already.
Wow.
I have a couple of models on Drupal.org. It was, for example, it was a small model to improve UI on multi-select values. I wrote code, put it in Drupal.org, and 10 years later, it looks like plain cabin with switches and so on. So I like Drupal. It makes my life easier.
Mm-hmm. Very good.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. How about you with the mic? Would you like to share your story?
Yeah, sure. I'm Peter. I'm educated as physics. So Drupal was my first framework I use after I leave my last job and company. It was 8 years ago, and I really enjoy Drupal and commerce modules, which allows me to survive these past years and grow 5 kids.
Wow.
So I really like it, and I'm proud to be next to such great people. Thank you.
Thank you. That's awesome.
My name is Eugene. I was studying in the university. It was engineering, and people from Belarus, they know we had a newspaper, old school newspaper from paper about computers, right? So I thought, okay, I got this newspaper, and there was an article about being a freelancer. So you can register on a freelance website and get some job there. So I thought, okay, I will register. I was not a developer by that time. Yeah, I started to study the development, but I didn't do anything, of course, commercially. So, and then, okay, bam, I started to bid on some projects, and one of the results was hit. Okay, you are hired. But I had a problem, because now I need to build a website. And I need to build a website for the shop, like not e-commerce, but like a shop in the Netherlands that sells board games. So first of all, I'm not a software developer by that time. Second, I should build a website in Dutch, which obviously I don't know. So, and then I had nights spent in the internet. I got a book, Drupal 5 development, and that's how basically the history starts. So right now it's, I don't know, 10 years later, I live in the Netherlands while doing a lot of community things in Belarus.
Great.
Klein beetje.
That's great.
Hi everyone, my name is Alex. Great to see you here. Thank you for all the stories there.
Thank you.
Very exciting. And small talk about me. I was working in as web performance engineer in the company that was doing some like analytics and so on. And that was Microsoft and .NET, but I was feeling like, well, real life is so far from part of database diggings that I am doing there. So I wanted very much to switch into the things that are like usual websites, a lot of communication, and still by now, I like the most in the Drupal that a lot of people who is involved, who is free to communicate about how they're building their stuff at work, and mostly I'm not closed with NDA like it was in .NET when I was afraid to talk how I'm working with those things. So this is great, and I want you to mention what powers you now when you are pretty high in the Drupal life and so on. So this is interesting too, because you know, most of the people here are pretty familiar with Drupal for many years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, mention this. Thanks.
Sure. So the question was, what keeps me going, like when I'm like at the okay, yeah, I guess. I didn't expect to get that question, so I just need, my CPUs need to buffer a little bit here. So I used to work at Lullabot doing like architecture and some development stuff and things like that. And so my job was to go to a client, you know, whether that's like MTV or Grammys or whoever it was, and help them get a Drupal site running to their specifications, pick the best of breed modules on that and all that kind of stuff. Then, in my other 40-a-week-hour job that I did not get paid for, I would contribute to the community. So I would, like, you know, I'd work on documentation, I'd review core patches, I, you know, did all kinds of things. In 2008, Dries put a call out for someone to become the Drupal 7 maintainer, which is like a core committer position that, you know, you would help guide the release of Drupal 7. And I kind of took a look at the situation and I was like, well, I can either keep doing development stuff, I can keep contributing module code, and I can keep doing that kind of stuff, or I could transition into this role where I'm helping other people, you know, do what they do, you know. And after a certain point, fixing the semicolon you forgot for the 1000th time just gets a little old. For me, I still love development. I still love busting out VI because I'm old school like that. Every once in a while and banging out some little project and stuff like that. But fundamentally, I could see a ceiling to what I can contribute that way. Versus if I transitioned into more of a community empowerment role, now all of a sudden I could use my availability and my passion and all that kind of stuff to help other people make the most out of their contributions. So in 2008, I applied for that position to Dries, and I got it. And I think my application was something like, I promise you 3 things. I'm going to focus on usability in Drupal, because we had just done a usability study at University of Minnesota with the one-way glass and the eye tracking and stuff, and it was obvious that Drupal was really, really hard to use, even for people who knew web development really well. So that was a passion. I wanted to fix that. I also wanted to do something around quality testing efforts because I was the test bot back then. So, I talked about those 26,000, tests that run on every patch. Every patch, I would be like, all right, let's start by installing Drupal and creating a node. Like, I was doing all that by hand. I was like, no, we got to fix that. So we added simple test to core, which is now PHP unit, which is great. but kind of promised to drive that effort. And I said, the third thing is I'm going to take everything super, super personally, and I'm like going to be deeply passionate about this and probably get my feelings hurt a lot. And that happened too, which was great. But anyway, so I started that. Lullabot gave me some time to work on Drupal 7 in that regard, but I was still balancing 2 jobs. So I was being my architect on one hand and then trying to do Drupal stuff on the other hand, and it was becoming unsustainable. So at the end of Drupal 7, once that released, I approached Dries and I asked him, hey, if you ever have a job at Acquia that's just being web chick all the time, like helping the community, just reach out to me and let me know. And he's like, oh, okay, I'll think about that. And then like a couple of weeks later, he's like, wouldn't you know? We do have a job like that. And so I accepted it. And so ever since then, I've been working on that. So what keeps me fired up, that was a very long-winded way of answering your question, is the people I see every day. I learn new things all the time. All the time. It's like I've been in Drupal since 2005, which is a very, very long time, but in that amount of time, I've seen all kinds of web trends come and go. I've seen all kinds of the way you build sites completely change several times. Like back when I started, it was 3 screen resolutions you had to worry about, and now it's like, because mobile and stuff. And I see the people who come into the project and how passionate they are about what they work on, and how willing everyone is to share the information that they know with other people. I know other open source communities can be kind of like, you don't know about the blah, blah, blah thing? Whatever, I'm not even dealing with you. Whereas in Drupal, it's like, oh, you don't know about the blah, blah, blah thing? It's awesome, let me tell you all about it. It's just a completely different thing, and I haven't really found that in other open source projects. So I pretty much stay for the community, and the role that I have at Acquia is basically there to make the community be awesome. And so it's a self-reinforcing cycle of awesomeness. That's the short answer. All right, I have 4 minutes, which is either enough to do 1 or 2 more stories or enough to go get coffee early, whatever we want to do with that. Any other stories? There's been some great ones. I really appreciate your willingness to share, because I was not sure how that would go, but. Yeah, do you want to talk about Drupal Squad? I'm Angie, put people on the spot, Byron, that's right. Yeah.
Sure. My name's Chris Dykstra. I'm CEO and founder of Drupal Squad. And how did I come to Drupal as a business guy? Because I'm not a coder or anything. But I have a long history of being an activist in the US around climate change and social justice issues in general. And started organizing around those issues in around 2000, I started organizing around 2000, and then on through the history. And I had already started a company here, WareCorp, and we did Ruby and Java and all kinds of other things, custom software development. But the way I sell and the way that we organize is around activism, or because it's just me over there. So I began to associate with the activist community, and guess what? They were organizing on Drupal. Because the case study for many of the customers that we serve was to create websites on a state-by-state basis, or some other kind of way of managing a lot of content. And content management in general was moving to open source anyway. And for me, I quickly recognized that open source is one of the most important aspects of social change that we have today. It's one of the best ways that we have to reinvent our world, to work together more on solutions in just a general way. I believe that the more we collaborate, the better shot we have of saving the planet and being at peace. And so that's how I came to Drupal in 2006. That interest had grown, and the practice had grown to such a degree within WareCorp that we founded this thing called Drupal Jobs, which was a spectacular, it grew organically to a certain point, but the whole thing was pretty messed up. And then through that experience, we realized that one of the biggest problems was maintenance and support. And so, for any content management or any enterprise system to really scale, you have to have a good bedrock of maintenance and support. And so we founded a company to focus on that and hopefully grow along with it.
Very cool. All right.
Okay, we run out of time.
I think so. We have like 23 seconds left or something like that. so-
Exactly.
All right. Yeah, well, thank you.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much for coming. And thank you for inviting me. It's an honor to be here and just see how excited people are. And yeah, but to your point, people here have been using Drupal since like some of the contributors were in diapers, which is pretty cool. So anyway, well done, everybody. This is an awesome community, and I'm really happy to be a part of it. So thank you for having me.
Please stop